Hey there, sleepyheads. If you're here right now, maybe it's late, and your mind just needed a softer place to land. Maybe you're lying in bed, scrolling under dim lights, looking for something calm, familiar, maybe even comforting. If so, you're exactly where you should be. Tonight we're not just talking about SpongeBob. We're going back to a feeling. Quiet mornings, warm blankets, cartoons playing softly in the background. Back when life felt lighter. So take a breath. Let the day fade. Pull your blanket a little closer. And let's begin. It always starts with that quiet glow from the TV. The kind that felt like it kept the room together when everything else was dark. Not too bright, just kind of gentle, like it knew you were tired and didn't want to startle you. Bikini Bottom appears slowly, almost like the screen is waking up with you. Even the colors feel softer than usual, like someone turned the volume down on the whole world. Nothing loud, nothing fast, just a place that seems familiar, even if you can't remember why. But that wasn't the strange part yet. There's a feeling that comes with moments like that. A feeling like time is stretching a little, giving you space to breathe. You might have felt it before when you stayed up too late on a school night, and cartoons quietly played, even though no one else was watching. The fridge would hum from the kitchen. A car might pass outside every few minutes, and your eyes would half close, as if the episode was slowly tucking you in. But the crazy thing is, Bikini Bottom feels exactly like that here, like it understands what a long day really feels like. The streets aren't empty, but they aren't busy either. They just exist the way thoughts drift around when you're almost asleep. SpongeBob's house sits quietly, like it's been waiting all night for morning to arrive. The air looks still like the town knows it should stay quiet. You can imagine the feeling of resting your head on a couch pillow while the blinds let in just a sliver of moonlight. It feels like back then, when the only thing that mattered was if you were awake enough to see the next scene. But that feeling only grew stronger later. SpongeBob hasn't said a word yet. Somehow, that makes it even calmer. You can almost hear distant bubbles rising from the ocean floor, like they're trying not to disturb anything. Even when nothing is said, the silence feels friendly, the way a living room does when everybody else is asleep, and you're the only one still awake, half watching, half dreaming. Maybe you've known that kind of silence before. It doesn't talk, but it stays with you anyway. There's something unique about being half awake during a cartoon that meant everything back then. Not for the story, but for the feeling that everything was okay. You didn't have to be anywhere. You didn't have to explain anything. You just existed under that quiet glow, while a world beneath the sea waited patiently for you to notice it. It didn't end there. Something changed quietly afterward. The camera drifts toward the Krusty Krab, like it remembers how many times it held your laughter. Even if you can't name the episodes, you can still feel what it was like to watch them. Maybe you had a snack in your hand. Maybe you were wrapped in a blanket on a Saturday morning, with sunlight barely sneaking through the curtains. Even now, just thinking about it makes your shoulders drop a little. Something about that moment stayed. And before anything really happens, before any character says a single line, it already feels comforting. Like someone pressed play on a memory you forgot you had. A memory from a time when the world moved slower, when schedules didn't own your thoughts, and when your heart felt a little lighter. Bikini Bottom isn't just a place on TV tonight. It feels like somewhere your mind goes when it needs a softer place to rest. Maybe that's why it's still here, waiting gently in the glow. They say every show has episodes that never made it to air. Lost stories tucked somewhere between memory and imagination. This one feels like that. The screen doesn't begin with music. Just a long breath of ocean sounds like waves brushing against the edges of your thoughts. You can almost feel them passing by, like someone walking down a hallway with the lights turned off. Something about that moment stayed, even though nothing had really happened yet. The colors are muted, slightly faded, like an old VHS tape you found in a box from years ago. Even the title card moves slower, as if it isn't sure whether to appear all the way. It feels strange and familiar at the same time, like seeing a dream you forgot you had. That wasn't where it ended, though. There was something about this intro that felt personal, like Bikini Bottom wasn't talking to everyone tonight, just to the one person who needed it most. No laugh track, no upbeat theme, just water shifting quietly in the background. The silence doesn't feel empty. It feels intentional, like the episode knows someone out there is watching with heavy eyes and a crowded mind hoping for a moment to breathe. You might have experienced something like this before, when you turned on the TV just to have a voice in the room, even though you didn't really care what was playing. It felt safe just having it there, especially during nights when thoughts didn't slow down. There's an ease to it all, like the show isn't trying to impress you. It's just letting you be. The way you sit on a front porch late at night, listening to distant cars passing by, while the air cools down a little. This episode doesn't try to solve anything. It just sits beside you quietly, just like a friend who knows sometimes all you need is company, not answers. But something changed quietly afterward, almost like the story began, before the episode did. The camera pans across empty ocean streets. No characters yet. Just the soft rumble of water and a slight flicker from the lights overhead. It's almost like the town itself is waking up slowly, stretching after a long sleep. It doesn't hurry. It doesn't need to. The silence lets your thoughts wander, but never too far. That might be why it feels so easy to stay with it. There's no rush, just a slow glide past places you recognize, even if they look different tonight. The Krusty Krab sign flickers once, as though remembering something but staying quiet about it. SpongeBob's house glows gently in the distance, but no windows are lit yet. Jellyfish Fields rests in a kind of stillness that reminds you of early summer mornings, before anyone else was awake, when cereal sat on the counter and cartoons played softly in the background. Those mornings didn't ask you to do anything. They just let you feel okay. That wasn't the strange part yet. You get this quiet feeling that maybe this episode played one time only. Maybe it came on late, when everyone else was asleep, except for you and the humming TV screen. It feels like the kind of thing you'd swear you saw back then, but can never find again. Not online, not on DVDs, not even in memories that stayed clear. It sits in that space between remembering and imagining, and yet it doesn't feel lost. It feels like it's waiting. As the scene fades to black for a moment, the ocean lingers just long enough to make you wonder if it's listening. Not loud, not dramatic, just slow, calm, patient, like the show knew somebody out there needed quiet more than anything. And if you've ever laid awake at night trying not to overthink, maybe you know what that kind of silence can do. It doesn't fix anything, but it makes the night feel a little easier to carry. And maybe that was always the point. SpongeBob wakes up before the sun fully rises. No alarm, no meowing from Gary. Just the kind of quiet that eases in instead of arriving all at once. Morning light doesn't pour in. It stretches slowly across the floor, like it's not sure if it should be here yet. Something about that moment stayed. It feels like the world pressed pause without anyone noticing. He sits up slowly, as if rushing would break the calm. The room looks the same as always, yet somehow different. Not wrong, just slower, like time is moving gently instead of ticking loudly. Maybe you've felt that feeling before. The kind where nothing's out of place, yet everything feels slightly rearranged. That wasn't the strange part yet. There's no sound from outside, not even the usual chatter from across the street. SpongeBob glances toward the window, expecting something familiar, but nothing comes. It doesn't scare him. It just makes him breathe slower, like the quiet is giving him space. You can almost picture a living room in the early morning TV screen, still dark, maybe a blanket on the floor, after a sleepover, and the air feeling cooler than it did the night before. Those mornings didn't ask for anything. They just waited alongside you. SpongeBob steps out of bed. Each footstep feels softer than usual, like the floor was wrapped in memory. The silence isn't heavy. It just exists. Kind of like when you wake up before everyone else in the house, and all you hear is the fridge humming and the faint rustle of trees outside. In those moments, there's nothing you need to figure out. Just time stretching out ahead, like a long hallway with no destination. But that feeling only grew stronger later. He walks through the house, slowly noticing how every room takes its time to wake up. The kitchen light flickers, then settles. A drawer creaks slightly, then stays still. Even Gary's bowl sits untouched, glimmering faintly under a quiet morning sun. SpongeBob doesn't call out for him at first. Something inside tells him this isn't a day for questions. It's a day for noticing. Everything feels still yet alive in its own soft way. Growing up sometimes feels exactly like this. That quiet shift when things make a little less noise and you start hearing your own thoughts more clearly. Not lonely, just spacious, like your mind finally has room to walk around. SpongeBob stands in the doorway, breathing in the still air and letting it settle. There's no rush. The day will wait. He goes to the window and watches the sky shift from pale blue to a softer yellow. It reminds him of early mornings before school, when the TV would be on, but nobody was really watching it. You just sit on the couch holding a bowl of cereal, staring at the screen, like you were waiting for your mind to catch up. Sometimes you didn't even turn the volume on. You just needed the glow. Something about that moment stayed. The silence doesn't answer anything. It just lets him feel. Maybe that's what makes it comforting. There's a kind of peace that lives in quiet places that don't ask you to fill them. SpongeBob looks around one more time and realizes the world hasn't abandoned him. It's just moving in gentle slow motion today, like a record playing at half speed, like the ocean taking a long breath. He steps outside into soft daylight. No noise, no hurry, just space. And in that moment, he isn't alone. He's simply early. And sometimes, being early feels just like being lost until everything else catches up. The world wasn't empty. It was waking up one quiet moment at a time. SpongeBob walks toward the Krusty Krab, the same way he's done 1,000 times before. His footsteps follow the usual route, almost without thinking. There's something comforting about walking a path your body already knows. The kind of walk where you don't need directions, because your feet remember for you. But this time feels different already, even though nothing has changed yet. You might have felt that while visiting an old place long after you've grown up. Something about that moment stayed. The doors aren't locked. That's unusual, but not alarming. The handle feels cold for a second, and then the door opens without resistance, like it was waiting for him. Inside, the air is still calm and still, in a way that doesn't ask for questions. Everything is perfectly clean. Tables wiped down chairs, a lined napkin dispensers full. It looks exactly like opening time, except nobody's here. He steps inside quietly. His shoes make a soft, scuffing sound against the floor, like they're trying not to interrupt anything. The soda machine lets out a tiny fizz every few seconds, like it's remembering something. SpongeBob doesn't panic. Instead, he just looks around slowly, noticing details he might not have paid attention to before. The ketchup bottles all face the same way. The spatula is resting at the grill angle, perfect shine intact. It feels like the whole place was paused carefully. Coming back to a familiar place after time has passed can feel like seeing it for the first time. Kind of like visiting your old school years after graduating. Everything looks the same, but somehow both smaller and bigger than you remember. The Krusty Krab feels exactly like that today. The air holds a memory, but it doesn't say what memory it is. It simply waits. He walks behind the counter, moving gently, as though rushing would break some invisible rule. The kitchen is spotless. Not like a rush just happened, but like it hasn't been touched in a long time. Even the fryer seems calm, almost thoughtful. The silence here doesn't feel empty. It feels held like someone pressed pause and stepped away promising they'd return soon. But that wasn't where it ended. SpongeBob places his hand on the register. He expects the usual beep, but nothing comes. Instead, he listens to the quiet in between the soda machine's tiny sighs. Something about that quiet feels familiar. Maybe it's the feeling of being the first person awake on a Saturday morning when the rest of the house is still asleep. You can almost hear the distant hum of a neighbor's car starting, or a floorboard settling somewhere. Comfort doesn't always come from noise. Sometimes it lives in the space after it. He stands in the middle of the restaurant and looks at every chair one by one. None of them are tipped over. None of them out of place, like every person who ever sat here left gently. The kind of departure that doesn't leave a trace. Maybe that's why it doesn't feel lonely. It feels like the start of a new morning, before customers arrive, before orders are shouted, before life gets loud again. He reaches for his spatula, not to cook, just to hold it. The metal feels cool against his palm, and for a moment, it's like holding an entire memory of years spent behind this counter. All the laughter, all the routines, the tiny victories that nobody ever saw. Maybe he's not alone here. Maybe the routine itself is keeping him company. The Krusty Krab doesn't feel abandoned. It feels like it's breathing slowly, like it's waiting for something unnamed. And as SpongeBob stands there in the gentle quiet, he feels it too. Not a mystery to solve, just a moment to notice. Sometimes beginnings don't start with noise. Sometimes they begin in a room that remembers you, even after everyone else is gone. They say oceans have memories. Not the kind that speak loudly, just small ripples of things that used to be. SpongeBob steps outside the Krusty Krab, and the morning air greets him slowly, like it's still figuring out how to wake up. The sky holds a soft gray tint, and you can almost feel a breeze move around him, like a thought passing by. Something about that moment stayed. The ocean is calm today. No rushing waves, no crashing sounds, just a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat hidden beneath the surface. It doesn't demand attention. It simply exists. SpongeBob listens, and the water sounds almost like it's trying to speak to him, but too softly to make out any words. Maybe that's how memories really work. Not as full pictures, just feelings that return when the world gets quiet enough. He walks toward the shore with small, careful steps. Sand presses gently under his feet, leaving only temporary footprints that fade almost immediately. Gary still hasn't shown up, and SpongeBob doesn't search for answers. There's a kind of peace in letting the morning be what it is. You might have felt that way too, on those quiet mornings, when nothing was wrong but everything felt slightly unfamiliar. That wasn't where it ended, though. The breeze brushes past like someone tapping your shoulder gently. It reminds him of walking home from school back then, when the air felt different depending on the day. Sometimes warm, sometimes cool, but always honest. The ocean seems to whisper those same things now, not clearly, just enough to make you listen. The fridge humming softly behind you, the distant sound of cars passing your house, the neighbor's dog barking just once. Tiny reminders that the world still moves, even when you don't. SpongeBob closes his eyes and imagines every ripple holding a story. A laugh from years ago. A conversation between friends who didn't know they were making memories. He remembers jellyfishing trips that felt endless, and nights when the stars seemed closer than usual. Maybe the ocean remembers all of that. Maybe it keeps those pieces in safe places until someone is quiet enough to notice them again. But something changed quietly afterward. There's no adventure waiting, no quest beginning. The feeling here is simpler. This episode doesn't want to surprise you. It just wants to sit with you the way an old friend might, on a slow evening porch light glowing over the driveway breeze, moving gently through the trees. SpongeBob breathes in the salty air and feels time settle. Not speed up, not stop, just breathe with him. The waves move closer for a moment, then drift away, as if remembering something and letting it go. That's how memories feel sometimes. A flash of light across water, a familiar voice in a dream, a scent that transports you years back before you even realize it. SpongeBob lets the feeling pass through him without trying to hold it. Sometimes, a memory just needs to be acknowledged, not solved. Standing there, in the quiet morning of a town he's known forever, things somehow feel new. Not changed, just freshly noticed. Like a place you've walked past every day suddenly looks different when the sun hits it at the right angle. The world doesn't have to be loud to be important. Some of the most important things arrive in silence. And maybe this episode isn't about adventure at all. Maybe it's about remembering the parts of life we didn't realize we forgot. The small, quiet things that waited patiently at the edge of our thoughts. And as SpongeBob listens one last time to the gentle sound of the ocean, he doesn't search for meaning. He just lets the memory move like a wave and fade with soft acceptance. Bikini Bottom looks different today. Not unfamiliar, just quieter, like it's still stretching after a long sleep. SpongeBob walks down the main road without any destination in mind. His footsteps are slow, not heavy, just careful, like he doesn't want to disturb the silence that settled over the town. The signs above the shops flicker now and then, as though remembering how to glow. Something about that moment stayed. The breeze that moves through the air doesn't rush either. It moves like it understands morning better than anyone else. The street feels like those early Saturday mornings back then, when you woke up before everyone else, and the cartoon channels were still playing filler music, waiting for the day to start. You didn't need cereal yet, or plans, or even company. You just sat there watching the colors on the screen glow softly, while sunlight crept across the carpet. SpongeBob walks with that same energy now. Nothing is urgent. Breathing feels easier. He passes by the tree dome, but the entrance is closed. The windows catch the light for a second, and it looks like a memory trying to surface. He doesn't stop. He just keeps walking like people do when they need to clear their head, without really knowing why. Maybe you've done that late at night in your car, music low, streetlights flashing across the windshield one by one. Not chasing anything, just letting your mind breathe. But that wasn't the strange part yet. The street curves slightly, and SpongeBob notices the small things. A paper drifting across the sidewalk without purpose. A mailbox door tapping gently against the wind. A streetlight buzzing faintly, like it's practicing being awake. It feels personal somehow, like the world has slowed itself down, just long enough for him to finally catch up. That feeling only grew stronger later. He passes Goo Lagoon, but the water is still quiet. Sometimes it's loud here, full of voices and laughter. Not today. The sand looks untouched, like it's been waiting for footprints, but doesn't mind being alone yet. SpongeBob watches it for a moment, and then continues walking. There's no rush in his steps. His thoughts move at the same pace as the breeze, which barely lifts his sleeves. You can almost hear distant car tires rolling down a late-night road back home, where only porch lights are still on. The buildings don't seem empty. They seem patient, like they're waiting for the day to begin, the same way someone might wait for a friend to wake up at a sleepover. SpongeBob looks at each one the way you look at old photographs. Not searching for anything, just noticing. Some corners look exactly how they used to. Some feel a little different, like time gave them new edges, but none of it feels wrong. Growing up can sometimes feel like this walk. You pass familiar places, and suddenly they feel slightly older. Not sad, just changed. Like they've lived whole stories when you weren't looking. SpongeBob takes a deeper breath, and for the first time in a while, he realizes he's not rushing anywhere. He's just here, walking, existing, letting the day unfold at its own pace. A seagull cries somewhere overhead, quick, then gone. The wind carries it away before he can tell where it came from. He listens anyway because listening feels easier than thinking right now. Maybe that's what this episode is about. A slow walk through a familiar place that becomes new when time moves gently enough for you to finally see it. As he reaches the end of the street, his footsteps stop. Not because the walk is over, but because stillness feels right for now. The town isn't asking for anything, it's simply waiting with him, and sometimes that's all a morning needs to do. Just wait. Just breathe. Just let somebody walk until their mind feels lighter than when they started. SpongeBob turns down the familiar path that leads to Patrick's house. The walk feels instinctive, like muscle memory guiding his steps. The neighborhood is still quiet, like it hasn't fully decided to wake up yet. When he reaches the yard, something feels different. The sand is smooth, untouched. No toys, no footprints, no sign of last night's adventures or yesterday's laughter. Just stillness. Something about that moment stayed. The rock is closed. Not unusual, but today it sits differently, almost like it's keeping a memory inside. SpongeBob pauses and just watches it for a while. He isn't worried. It feels more like driving past an old friend's house years after you stop talking and wondering quietly if they still live there. The kind of wondering that doesn't hurt. It just lingers. He remembers all the times Patrick's laughter filled the air here, the sound bouncing around like it was trying to stay forever. You can almost hear it now, even though the yard is silent. Kind of like when you walk through a school hallway long after graduating and swear you can still hear kids chatting by the lockers. Not clearly just faint echoes that never really left. But that wasn't the strange part yet. A breeze moves through the yard, stirring a little swirl of sand. It doesn't reveal anything. It just reminds him of how many summer afternoons they spent here. Jellyfishing nets leaning against the rock. Ice cream melting too fast. Plans that changed halfway through, but never felt disappointing. Back then, mornings didn't need reasons to be special. They just were. SpongeBob walks closer to the rock and looks at it the way someone studies an old photograph. The shape is the same, but it feels different now. More still, more grown in its own way. He knocks softly, just once. The sound fades quickly into the quiet air. No response, just the familiar silence of a place that once felt endless, and yet it doesn't feel lonely. Something else lives here now, a kind of quiet memory. Sometimes friendships shift without anyone meaning for them to. Not broken, not gone, just gentler than before, like tides changing direction without making a sound. SpongeBob sits on the edge of the sand and lets the thoughts settle. Maybe friendships don't disappear. Maybe they just move to quieter places in your heart, where they wait until you're ready to remember them again. That feeling only grew stronger later. The yard feels like a paused summer, the kind where everything is still bright, but nobody's outside yet. You can almost imagine a cooler full of sodas somewhere, a forgotten beach towel waiting on the porch swing. It reminds him of being a kid and staying up late at a friend's house, then waking early the next morning while everyone else slept. Those mornings didn't need words. They simply existed with gentle respect for silence. He knocks one last time, not to get an answer, but to let the space know he was here. His thoughts drift to all the memories they made together, and somehow it feels like they're still happening, just in a different time. Not stuck in the past, just looping gently like old reruns that never get canceled. Patrick's laughter still feels close, even though the yard is still. And maybe that's what matters most. SpongeBob stands and brushes sand off his hands. He doesn't push the moment. He doesn't chase answers. Some mornings aren't meant to explain themselves. They're just meant to breathe. As he steps away from the rock, he isn't sad. He's simply thoughtful, like someone turning a page slowly instead of closing a book. Friendship doesn't always need noise. Sometimes it simply waits quietly in familiar places. And today, that feels okay. There was something about the sky today. It wasn't its usual bright blue. The color felt softer, almost faded, like an old photograph left near a window for too long. It held a pale silver shade that made everything underneath it feel slower. SpongeBob noticed it right away, and something inside him paused, as if the sky was asking him to really look at it. That feeling only grew stronger later. He walked until he found a small bench near the corner of the street. It looked like a place meant for waiting, even though nobody was around. When he sat down, the silence felt different than before. It didn't press on him. It rested beside him. You might have known days like this, too. The kind that stick with you, even though nothing big happened. Those quiet, personal days where the light feels slightly off and your thoughts drift without direction. The clouds move slowly across the sky, not in a rush, just drifting like they were carrying ideas he hadn't had yet. SpongeBob watched them like someone watching water simmer before boiling. He didn't need to think. He just let the sky do the thinking for him. Maybe time moves differently on days like this. Not forward, just outward, like it's expanding gently around you. Sometimes, it's hard to explain why a day feels important. You just know it matters even if you can't say why. It might be the air, or the temperature, or a song you heard that morning. It could be a memory that almost surfaced, then drifted away before you could catch it. SpongeBob felt that now. Not sad, not confused, just aware that today might linger long after it ends. Something about that moment stayed. The wind brushed past lightly, like someone walking by without wanting to interrupt. Bikini Bottom remained quiet, but not empty. Every window, every street corner, every mailbox seemed to take its time being part of the morning. SpongeBob glanced at the buildings he'd passed so many times before, and for a second, they felt older, then familiar again. It reminded him of looking in the mirror and realizing you've grown without noticing. Growing up can sometimes feel like watching clouds drift. You don't see them change while staring at them, but when you look away for a moment and look back, everything seems slightly different. SpongeBob leaned against the bench and let that thought breathe. Days like this don't come with explanations. They just offer space. And sometimes that's enough. Far away, a gull called once. The sound didn't echo. It just hung in the air like a reminder that things were still moving. Somewhere someone was waking up. Somewhere someone was driving to work. Somewhere someone was walking their dog before breakfast. Even the smallest sounds felt connected to the sky today, as if everything knew it was supposed to be quiet. SpongeBob closed his eyes and let the light settle across his eyelids. He pictured the feeling of waking up early on summer vacation, when the sun was already up, and the cartoon channels were quietly playing reruns before the real shows began. Back then the air felt wide open, like it didn't expect much from you. Today feels like that, the kind of day that just lets you be. When he opened his eyes again, the sky seemed slightly brighter, but still gentle. He didn't rush to get up. He didn't need a destination. The clouds were still moving slowly, almost like they knew his pace. It wasn't a day for answers, just a day for noticing. And sometimes, noticing is all it takes for time to feel real. As he sat there, everything felt both new and remembered, like a moment waiting to settle quietly in the back of his mind, long after the day was gone. SpongeBob rises from the bench and starts walking again. The sky still holds that pale silver tone, like morning is taking its time waking up. He looks around to see if anyone has appeared yet. Squidward, Sandy, even Plankton. But the streets remain gently empty. It should feel lonely, but it doesn't. The air feels open like a hallway between thoughts. Something about that feeling stayed. The silence doesn't press on him anymore. It walks beside him, matching his pace. There's a calm in not knowing who he'll meet today. Maybe nobody. Maybe somebody. Either way, the town doesn't feel abandoned. It feels like it's listening. Like every building holds a memory, and every window remembers laughter, from days that came and went, without asking for attention. SpongeBob passes Squidward's house. The windows are still, but the place doesn't feel asleep. It feels paused. He listens closely, and for a moment, almost hears Squidward practicing his clarinet, not loudly, just a faint echo, the kind you hear in your mind before it fades. It reminds him of a quiet evening back then, when Squidward's music drifted across the neighborhood, like it didn't care if anyone liked it. Some sounds have intentions, others just exist. He keeps walking and passes the tree dome. Sandy isn't outside, but the grass around the dome moves gently, like something once ran across it. SpongeBob doesn't knock. He just watches the way the wind circles the dome, as if carrying a message. Maybe it's possible for a place to hold onto the people it once sheltered. Kind of like the way your childhood bedroom still echoes certain moments, even after you've changed. You might have felt something like that when you revisit a place you haven't been to in years. A park, a corner store, a street you always walked home from after school. Nothing looks exactly the same, but something inside, you recognizes it immediately. The familiarity is quiet, but it's there. That wasn't where it ended. Something else waited further down the road. He walks by the chum bucket next. Even this place, which once felt full of schemes and shouting, now looks peaceful in the morning light. The sign above the door sways slightly, as though recalling one of Plankton's plans. SpongeBob stands still for a second and listens. Not for danger, but for memory. And it comes, not as words, just as mood. The way certain school hallways still carry the faint buzz of old conversations you never meant to remember. The town isn't empty. It's filled with memories scattered like dust in sunlight. Every step forward feels like turning the pages of an old scrapbook. SpongeBob finds comfort in the pace. No rush, no chase, just gentle curiosity guiding his walk. Maybe he doesn't need anyone to talk to right now. Maybe the quiet itself is the company he needed. He pauses at a crosswalk. The lights blink slowly, like the town has all the time in the world. SpongeBob closes his eyes and hears it again. Faint laughter from somewhere that doesn't exist anymore. Not real, just remembered. You might have heard echoes like that too, when your mind drifts on a night you couldn't sleep, and old memories float through the half-closed thoughts, like fireflies. SpongeBob opens his eyes and keeps walking. The breeze follows. Nothing urgent waits ahead. Nothing expected, but that's what makes it calm. The mystery isn't heavy. It's soft like a question that doesn't require an answer. Bikini Bottom doesn't want to be solved. It just wants to be seen. Maybe today is about listening to a town that once held so many stories and still holds them quietly even when no one is watching. And for the first time in a long time, SpongeBob realizes he doesn't feel alone at all. He feels accompanied by 1,000 gentle echoes drifting in the air, like the world is talking in whispers meant for anyone willing to walk slow enough to hear them. SpongeBob keeps walking until the town grows still again. The silver sky hangs low like it's preserving the quiet. Then he hears it. Not loud, just different. A soft hum from somewhere beyond the streetlights. It doesn't startle him. It eases in like a note from a forgotten song slowly drifting across the air. Something about that moment stayed. He pauses and listens closer. The sound isn't steady. It rises and fades like it's trying to remember its own melody. SpongeBob looks around expecting something out of place, but everything looks the same. Buildings silent, roads empty. Only the sound remains. It doesn't belong, but it doesn't feel wrong. It simply waits. That wasn't the strange part yet. He follows it step by step, the same way someone might walk toward a memory they're not sure is real. Streetlights stand motionless, casting long shadows across the pavement. SpongeBob watches his own shadow, stretching before him like it's leading the way. The hum becomes a little clearer, but never sharp. More like the soft tone a TV makes when it's on with no channel picked. The kind of sound that fills a room only when everything else is quiet. SpongeBob crosses the empty street. His footsteps echo slightly, though he doesn't feel alone. The air carries the sound gently, as if it doesn't want it to get lost. Maybe someone once played music here, and the town remembered. Memories don't always stay in minds. Sometimes they hide in places, like the corners of old classrooms, or the creaking boards of a familiar porch. You might have felt that before. The world holding something you once felt, but forgot to keep. He walks past the last row of houses. They look peaceful, bathed in pale light. Curtains flutter slightly behind closed windows. A porch light flickers like it's thinking. SpongeBob slows his pace, letting the silence stretch between the notes of the hum. He doesn't feel the need to understand it, just to hear it. Some sounds only make sense when your head is quiet enough. The wind picks up gently, carrying the hum a little farther down the street. It feels like the kind of moment right before something returns in your memory. A name, a voice, a feeling you thought was gone. SpongeBob follows without rushing. Each step is careful, like walking across a creaky floor in an old house you once knew. He doesn't want to wake anything. He just wants to notice it. As he reaches the end of the block, the noise softens even more. It seems to blend with the ocean breeze, as if the sea is humming along. SpongeBob stops and listens. The world doesn't feel still anymore. It feels attentive, like it's waiting with him. That feeling only grew stronger later. He looks toward the horizon, where the light begins to fade behind the buildings. The sky remains silver, but feels deeper now, like there are layers beneath it. The air smells slightly salty, as if Goo Lagoon is close, even though he can't see it from here. SpongeBob takes a slow breath, letting the moment settle inside. Nothing feels urgent, just gently important. The sound appears again, but it shifts. Not louder, not clearer, just slightly closer. like someone humming a lullaby through a half-open door. SpongeBob realizes he isn't just calm anymore. He's curious, not anxious, just quietly drawn forward. The kind of curiosity that doesn't push. It guides. The kind that lives in the spaces between heartbeats when your thoughts soften before sleep. He stays still for a while, letting the quiet surround him. The street, the sky, the silence all become part of the same slow rhythm. And for the first time since he woke up, the day doesn't feel like it's happening to him. It feels like it's unfolding with him, side by side. Whatever waits ahead doesn't need to be solved. It only needs to be approached gently. And as SpongeBob listens one last time, he takes a step forward, not because he must, but because something in the air invites him to. Softly, patiently. The night isn't ending yet. It's only beginning to speak. SpongeBob walks toward Jellyfish Fields. The air grows lighter as he gets closer, like it isn't carrying the weight of town anymore. The grass moves softly, as though the field is breathing. It doesn't buzz like it used to. No electric swarms of jellyfish, no colorful streaks darting through the sky. Just quiet. A kind of quiet that arrives with purpose. Something about that moment stayed. Nature has its own rhythm. It never hurries. The wind glides across the grass like a finger brushing dust off an old photograph. SpongeBob slows down without thinking. His footsteps press gently into the dirt path, leaving marks that don't feel permanent. The field holds them for only a moment, before the wind smooths them away. It reminds him of warm summer mornings back then, when time felt wider, and every day stretched out like a soft horizon. A distant sound drifts across the air. The same hum he followed earlier, but a little more familiar now. Not clear enough to name just the feeling of someone remembering his name without saying it. He listens closely, and the quiet around him feels alive. You might have known nights like this, when rain taps softly on your window, or when waves roll in so slowly that they start blending into your thoughts. That wasn't where it ended, though. The field seems different without the jellyfish buzzing everywhere. It feels open, spacious, as if it's offering a place to think without demanding answers. SpongeBob walks deeper into the grass, and the breeze carries a whisper of something he can't place. Not words, just tone. The kind that exists between thoughts, when your mind finally slows down after a long day. Each step feels like walking through a memory you don't need to understand. Just one you're allowed to feel. He pauses at a small hill and looks out. The sky above is still silver, but now with soft streaks of blue trying to break through. The grass bends toward whichever direction the wind chooses. It doesn't resist. It just moves. SpongeBob sits down on the hill, letting the earth hold him the way couches used to when he was little and sleepy in front of the TV. You can almost hear the distant hum of a refrigerator or the quiet sound of neighbors moving through their houses. Those sounds always meant safety. The hum returns again slightly stronger. It doesn't startle him. It comforts him like a melody from a song he once heard while falling asleep. Maybe the field remembers his footsteps from all the times he came here before chasing jellyfish with excitement. Maybe it remembers the laughter that filled the air. Maybe it remembers the silence that followed when the day ended and everyone went home. The field feels like it's holding all of that at once. Nature never asks you to speak. It just asks you to be present. SpongeBob lets the moment stretch, feeling the wind brush past the sides of his face. If he closed his eyes, he might not be able to tell whether he was above water or beneath it. That's the thing about calm places. They meet you wherever you are. He doesn't need to understand the sound yet. He just needs to hear it. Some memories return slowly, like waves that get closer with every tide, until one day they reach your feet. SpongeBob stays seated on the hill, listening to the field breathe around him. The wind carries scents of salt and grass mixed together, like the air is telling an old story in pieces. There's no rush here, no questions to answer, just steady breath and movement. Jellyfish Fields feels like the kind of place you could sit in for hours without saying a word and still feel understood. And in that calm, quiet morning, SpongeBob finally lets himself just listen, not to solve anything, but to remember the pace his heart knew before life started moving faster. SpongeBob stands among the soft grass, letting the breeze settle around him. Jellyfish Fields feels almost frozen now, like it's holding its breath. Then something shifts. Not a sound, not a movement, just a feeling. He stops walking and looks ahead like something invisible passed by. It doesn't feel like surprise. It feels like recognition. Something about that moment stayed. The light across the field flickers just once, like a camera flash in the corner of his vision. A small pulse of brightness. For a second he sees something, not clearly, not fully, but something. A memory maybe, but not one he remembers living. It appears quietly, then fades just as quickly. Someone laughing. Not loud, just playful. The kind of laugh you hear at a birthday party when the candles are already blown out. But SpongeBob doesn't recognize it. He blinks, and the sound is gone, leaving only soft wind. The field looks unchanged, yet feels different, like it's storing something beneath the surface. Maybe memories don't always belong to one person. Maybe places keep them too. You might have felt that while walking into a room you've never been in, yet something there already feels familiar. That wasn't where it ended, though. The wind slows down. Grass stands still. Air becomes thick, as if time itself is pausing to listen. SpongeBob takes a careful breath, like someone entering a dream and trying not to wake themselves up. He doesn't feel scared, just quietly curious, as if a thought has started forming, but isn't ready to speak yet. The silence feels like when commercials ended late at night, and the station turned to a blank screen. You could hear the TV, but nothing was on. Another flicker of memory appears, not visual this time, just a feeling. Warm light, footsteps on wooden floors, maybe a living room from a different life. SpongeBob doesn't chase it. He lets it linger like mist. His chest feels heavy in a comforting way, like wearing a sweater that belonged to someone else. Maybe memories can be borrowed. Maybe feelings don't need origins to be real. He looks across the field again, and imagines laughter moving through the air, like fading radio static. It reminds him of walking past strangers in a mall when he was younger, hearing bits of conversations that didn't belong to him, but still left traces. Certain tones, certain words, certain pieces of stories that stay in your mind long after you forget where you heard them. Maybe that's why silence can feel so full. SpongeBob kneels down and touches the grass. It's cool under his hand, still gently damp with morning dew. Nothing rises from it. Yet it feels like a place that has seen things. Days with friends, nights with questions, moments nobody recorded, but somehow still happened. The field doesn't tell him its story. It just lets him know one exists. That feeling only grew stronger later. His thoughts drift like clouds. He wonders if memories could be shared between people without them ever meeting. If feelings could travel like sound waves, reaching those who need them most. Maybe memory isn't only what you lived. Maybe it's also what you feel when the world is quiet enough to speak softly. A seagull flies by overhead and gives a single cry. The air stirs again, as though the pause has ended. SpongeBob stands slowly, letting the moment pass without trying to hold on to it. The grass waves gently, the sky breathes again, and the hum from earlier remains distant but present. He starts walking once more, but more slowly than before. Sometimes memories don't need answers. Sometimes they just pass through, clearing space for thoughts you haven't had yet. And as SpongeBob continues moving across the field, he doesn't wonder if the memory was real. He simply accepts it, like a note in a song that belongs to more than one person. SpongeBob keeps walking through Jellyfish fields when something catches his eye. Footprints in the sand. Fresh ones. They look like someone was here not too long ago. He pauses and studies them. They don't move quickly. They take their time winding through the grass like whoever left them wasn't in a rush. Something about that moment stayed. He begins to follow them, step by step. The wind drifts behind him as though watching quietly. For a while, the path feels certain, like it knows where it wants to go. SpongeBob doesn't question it. He just walks. Sometimes direction feels better than answers. The footprints shift slightly, as if turning towards something unseen. But that wasn't where it ended. Halfway across the field, they fade, just dissolve into untouched sand. No warning, no explanation. SpongeBob stops. His steps slow down, and the silence grows wider. It's that feeling when something almost makes sense, and then just disappears before you can grasp it. Strangely, though it doesn't scare him, it just makes him breathe slower. He stands there for a moment, not knowing what to do next. There's no sign telling him which way to turn. No clues, no obvious path, just space. The kind that doesn't pressure you, it just invites you to sit with it for a while. You might have felt that during a late-night walk, when your mind asks where it's supposed to go, and your heart replies with silence. SpongeBob watches the sand, waiting for something to reveal itself. But nothing does. The wind shifts direction, moving his hair slightly. A cloud drifts slowly overhead. Even the sky feels like it's considering what to do. Uncertainty doesn't always mean something is wrong. Sometimes it just means you're in between steps. He imagines someone standing where he is now earlier in the day. Maybe they felt the same thing. Maybe they weren't lost. Maybe they just needed time. Life can feel like that sometimes. A map with pieces missing on purpose. A story that asks you to read between the lines instead of rushing to the last page. That feeling only grew stronger later. SpongeBob kneels down and brushes his hand across the last visible footprint. It's still warm from the sun. It doesn't lead anywhere, but maybe that's okay. Maybe direction doesn't always arrive when you expect it. Maybe it comes in layers, slowly, like clouds moving across the sky so gradually you barely notice until they're gone. He sits down in the sand and lets the stillness settle around him. Jellyfish Fields doesn't feel empty. It feels open, like a pause between songs, a breath held just long enough to make the next one feel sweeter. You can almost imagine distant music from a TV playing softly in another room while everyone else has fallen asleep. Soft sound, soft air, soft thoughts. SpongeBob looks around again. Nothing points the way forward. Yet he doesn't feel stuck, just suspended, like a moment between moments, where things haven't begun and haven't ended. Maybe that's where growth hides, between certainty and confusion, in the quiet space where your thoughts stretch instead of retreat. He closes his eyes for a moment and just listens. To the wind, to the distant hum still floating somewhere in the air, to the silence that doesn't demand anything from him. When he opens his eyes, the footprints haven't returned, but his breathing feels easier. The world hasn't given an answer, but it has given time, and maybe that's enough for now. SpongeBob slowly stands up and lets the moment go. He doesn't know which direction to walk next, but he starts walking anyway. Not toward anything, just forward. Some paths don't appear until you move. And as he walks across the open field, the empty space around him doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like permission. SpongeBob reaches a small hill that overlooks the field. The grass looks like it's swaying under a slow breath, everything moving at the same pace as his thoughts. He climbs to the top and sits down, feeling the earth settle beneath him. There's no plan and no reason to think ahead. Something about that moment stayed. He looks out across the quiet scenery and waits for his mind to start working again. It doesn't. There are no questions rushing in, no reminders, no lists to check, just empty space. Not scary empty, just clear. Like opening a notebook and seeing a blank page that doesn't rush to be filled. That feeling only grew stronger later. The wind brushes past like a soft blanket moving across the grass. He closes his eyes and listens. There's no pressure in the silence. It doesn't demand answers. It doesn't remind him of anything. It simply lets him exist. You might have wished for that kind of silence before. The kind that slows everything down without making you feel behind. It's strange how not knowing anything can sometimes feel peaceful. SpongeBob tries to remember what happened before today, but nothing comes. Instead of fear, he finds relief. Maybe forgetting is the brain's way of giving us rest when life gets too heavy, like taking a long drive with no destination. Windows cracked just enough to let the wind fill the car. You don't think, you just move. The grass brushes against his legs. The sky hangs pale overhead, with a faint warmth that doesn't hurry to become sunlight. SpongeBob breathes and notices he hasn't looked at the time once. There are no clocks here, no deadlines, just rhythm, the kind that nature understands better than people sometimes. He doesn't feel behind. He doesn't feel late. He just feels here. Maybe that's what clarity really is. Not having all the answers, but having space to breathe before searching for them. SpongeBob lets the thought pass gently. The field stays quiet. Yet the world doesn't feel empty. It feels alive in the softest way. Every blade of grass, every patch of sand, every roll of wind carries a calm honesty. Nothing pretends. Nothing rushes. He opens his eyes and sees nothing urgent, nothing demanding. The field doesn't care about what he forgot. It just lets him sit here with the quiet. Sometimes, overthinking needs a place like this, a pause button that doesn't ask you to explain anything. Just a moment where your thoughts can rest without being judged. The sound he heard earlier feels far away now. Not gone, just gentle, like a song playing in a room you haven't reached yet. SpongeBob doesn't chase it. He understands that some sounds are meant to be heard only when you're ready to listen. And maybe he's not ready yet. Or maybe the sound isn't meant to be solved. Maybe it's simply part of the air he's breathing. He lays back against the grass and lets his arms rest at his sides. The wind moves over him again, steady as a heartbeat. Time feels different here, not shorter or longer, just softer, like it's stretching comfortably instead of racing ahead. You might have felt that while lying in bed on a quiet night, TV light flickering behind closed eyes, thoughts finally fading into calm. SpongeBob doesn't try to remember anymore. He doesn't force clarity. He doesn't ask for answers. For the first time since waking up, he feels okay not knowing what came before today. Forgetting might not always be a failure. Sometimes it's just a quiet way of healing. He keeps still. The world keeps breathing. And in that shared silence, everything begins to feel light enough to carry again. SpongeBob lies still on the hilltop, breathing with the wind. The quiet feels like it has found a rhythm. For a moment, it seems like nothing else will happen today. Then he hears it. Not the hum this time. A voice, calm and gentle, not calling his name but speaking to him anyway. The kind of voice that arrives when your thoughts are finally quiet. Something about that moment stayed. It isn't clear. It isn't loud. It sounds like the ocean remembering him, a soft echo beneath the breeze, like a low tide whispering against the shore. SpongeBob opens his eyes slowly. The sky is still silver. The clouds drift without direction, as though they're following the same voice. That wasn't where it ended, though. He sits up, listening carefully. The voice doesn't form words, yet it carries meaning, like the kind of comfort that doesn't need sentences. It reminds him of nights when the TV volume was turned all the way down, but the room still felt full. Sometimes, presence speaks louder than sound. You might have felt it too. The quiet sense that something is with you even when nothing is said. The tide is moving now, not fast, more like it's thinking. Each wave rolls in, as if considering the shore before gently touching it. SpongeBob watches the motion. It feels almost familiar, like watching a clock tick slowly after a long day, or hearing a ceiling fan spin above your bed, while your eyes get heavy. A rhythm that doesn't need explanation. The voice returns briefly, softer than before. It doesn't ask him to understand. It only asks him to notice. The way you sometimes notice your own heartbeat when the world finally gets quiet enough. SpongeBob stands carefully, as though the air might break if he moves too fast. His footsteps feel lighter now, less deliberate, more guided. He doesn't know why, but he feels a pull to walk back toward the town. Not an order, not urgency, just a feeling, like a thread tugging gently from far away. The kind of feeling that shows up in dreams when a memory tries to lead you somewhere. SpongeBob doesn't resist. He lets his body follow what his mind hasn't figured out yet. That feeling only grew stronger later. As he walks down the hill, the wind shifts direction, brushing against his shoulders like a quiet nudge. The hum is gone now, but the voice lingers like the last note of a song fading into silence. The field behind him feels calm, as though it has given him what it meant to share. Nature sometimes speaks in moments rather than messages. The closer he gets to town, the more the air changes. Warmer now, but still careful. The path ahead looks untouched, waiting. SpongeBob remembers the footprints from earlier, but doesn't need them anymore. Direction doesn't always need markers. Sometimes, it just needs willingness. You might have walked forward before without knowing why, but feeling like you should. And maybe that was enough. He glances back one last time at Jellyfish Fields. The grass sways softly, as if saying a slow goodbye. No applause, no answers, just a closing breath. SpongeBob nods gently, not in farewell, but in thanks. As he walks toward town, he feels a quiet certainty. Not that he understands, but that understanding doesn't need to arrive all at once. Maybe memories guide you before you remember them. Maybe voices come from places you once felt safe. Maybe the ocean remembers things people forget. The voice doesn't return. It doesn't need to. SpongeBob already heard what it meant to say. And now, with the sky still silver above him, and the tide thinking softly behind him, he follows the pull back to town. Not with urgency, not with worry, just with a peaceful curiosity, as if the next part has already begun. SpongeBob reaches Squidward's house as the light shifts slightly across the town. The face on the building looks still, almost thoughtful, like it hasn't spoken in a while. No clarinet sounds, no sighs, no distant muttering about neighbors being too cheerful. Everything is still. The kind of stillness you notice only when you get older. Something about that moment stayed. Gee, he remembers how loud this place used to be. Squidward complaining through the window. Squidward rolling his eyes at SpongeBob's morning energy. Squidward telling the world to keep it down, even when it was already quiet. As a kid, it was funny. But now it feels different. Like maybe Squidward wasn't annoyed. Maybe he was just tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from work, but from noise. SpongeBob walks up slowly and doesn't knock. He just stands there and listens. The silence isn't empty. It has weight. A type of quiet that settles instead of fades. It hangs in the air, like the pause between verses of a song. Maybe this is what rest sounds like when it finally arrives. A peace that doesn't need permission. That feeling only grew stronger later. Squidward's yard looks untouched. No footprints. No signs of the usual grumbling morning routine. The doormat sits perfectly straight, like someone adjusted it carefully before stepping away. SpongeBob feels no urge to speak. Words feel too loud right now. Instead, he lets the air speak for him, the same way a still room can answer you without anyone saying anything at all. The walls seem to hold memories, quiet ones. Maybe Squidward spent his mornings here with coffee, listening to nothing but the wind. Maybe he practiced his clarinet when nobody could hear him, playing songs he didn't need anyone to like. SpongeBob wonders if people sometimes mistake solitude for sadness, when sometimes it's simply breathing room. He steps a little closer to the house. The stone exterior feels colder than usual, but not unfriendly, just preserved. Like it's been waiting, not for excitement, not for company, but for calm. You might have felt something like that too, coming home after a long day and not turning on any lights, just letting the dark room hold you for a while, Not lonely, just recovering. That wasn't where it ended, though. A breeze moves across the yard and brushes past SpongeBob's shoulders. It feels like someone quietly acknowledging his presence, not welcoming or rejecting, just noticing. He looks at the window and imagines Squidward inside, sitting with a cup of tea, letting the morning pass peacefully. Maybe silence was never his complaint. Maybe it was what he wanted all along. SpongeBob realizes that sometimes growing up means understanding what tired really looks like. It's not always about collapsing. Sometimes it just means wanting a quieter corner to stand in, a softer soundscape, a place where thoughts move at their own pace. He doesn't need to say anything to Squidward's house. There's respect in leaving a quiet place undisturbed. Instead, he listens to the silence a little longer. It feels both heavier and lighter at the same time, like someone finally got the rest they needed, and the world is honoring it. The sky above shifts slightly toward blue. Morning is still coming slowly, but it's closer than before. SpongeBob takes a step back, giving the house space. The wind circling the rooftop feels like a quiet conversation between old friends. No words necessary. He turns to leave, but moves at half speed, as though hurrying would be disrespectful. His footsteps barely make a sound on the sand. Squidward's house remains still behind him, not forgotten, not lonely, simply present, like a book placed carefully on a shelf, once it's finished saying what it needed to say. And as SpongeBob walks away, he understands solitude differently. It isn't always empty. Sometimes it's simply enough. SpongeBob makes his way back toward town as the sky shifts from silver to a softer mix of blue and purple. Evening is easing in slowly, not as an ending, but as a gentle change of tone. When he reaches the Krusty Krab, the doors are still unlocked, still empty. But this time, he notices things he didn't before. Something about that moment stayed. The chairs sit neatly, but one is slightly turned, as if someone stood up recently and left in a hurry, or maybe just forgot to push it in. A ketchup bottle on table 3 is halfway full, its cap resting crooked like a tired head. The soda machine sighs every now and then, releasing little breaths into the air, as though it's remembering yesterday. These details don't make the place feel abandoned. They make it feel lived in. SpongeBob walks behind the counter at a slower pace than usual. The spatula still rests on its hook, clean, waiting. The kitchen light above the grill flickers before finding its brightness. Nothing here feels loud. Everything feels paused. You might have felt that in an empty classroom beyond school hours, or in a grocery store late at night, when only a few aisles are lit. Quiet, but comforting. Familiar, but changed. He wipes down a table, simply because it feels right to do so, not out of habit, out of care. The cloth glides across the surface easily, and he wonders how many mornings he spent here before sunrise, firing up the grill, while the air still held a touch of nighttime. Back then, everything had a routine, a rhythm. Now the rhythm is softer, slower, but still present if he listens carefully. He walks to the window and watches the sky deepen. Streetlights begin to flicker on outside, their glow stretching across the sand. The Krusty Krab almost looks like a lighthouse this time of day, a place that doesn't need to move to guide people toward it. That wasn't where it ended, though. He notices fingerprints on the napkin dispenser. Faint ones, the kind that stay only a day before being replaced. He sees them like evidence of laughter that once sat at that table. Maybe someone told a story over lunch. Maybe someone solved a problem while sitting alone. Maybe someone tried to. Silence doesn't erase life. It just sends it into the corners. That realization settles inside him. Emptiness is not always absence. It can be memory. The soda machine releases another quiet sigh, and SpongeBob feels a familiar warmth in his chest. Like walking into an old diner after midnight while traveling, hearing a single coffee cup clink in the distance, knowing you're not the only one awake. Routine places offer a certain kind of comfort when they're quiet. They let you exist without needing to perform. He thinks of people working late shifts, the ones who clean up after everyone else, who refill supplies when the rest of the world is sleeping, the ones who keep things running when no one is watching. Silence can be heavy, but sometimes it's a sign of care. SpongeBob takes one last slow look around the restaurant. Everything in the room feels like it's waiting, not impatiently, just patiently. The same kind of waiting you feel when a movie pauses on screen and the room becomes still before a play resumes. Maybe the world isn't abandoned. Maybe it's just listening. As the sky outside deepens into evening, SpongeBob steps toward the door. The Krusty Krab doesn't call for him to stay, but it doesn't let him go either. It simply holds its space. A quiet presence, a resting heart. And for a moment, SpongeBob almost hears it. Not words, just a gentle feeling. The kind that sounds like, "We're open. Not yet, but soon." SpongeBob walks behind the counter, noticing how the late light touches the walls with a gentle gold. It makes everything look softer, like the restaurant is remembering itself. Then he sees it, the shift schedule, still pinned to the wall just beside the grill. The edges are curled, the paper slightly yellowed, names faded, dates smudged, some weeks filled in, others completely blank. Something about that moment stayed. He steps closer and reads the lists, slowly, as if the words might disappear if he blinks. There's his name, written over and over again. Some days circled, others crossed out. A few penciled in with handwriting that feels like a memory in itself, maybe from mornings when he arrived early, smiling before the lights were even on, or evenings when he worked a little later than usual, just to finish one last order. On the schedule, Squidward's name appears sometimes, occasionally crossed out, occasionally rewritten. Patrick's name is there only once, written in shaky letters, as if someone knew he wouldn't last long. Sandy's name is on one corner, faded, like it was added during an emergency. The chum bucket row is blank every week, the kind of blank that speaks louder than words. SpongeBob stares at the schedule and feels something quiet moving inside him. It's strange to see so much time flattened into a page. Weeks that felt long now take up only thin lines. Days that seemed impossible to forget are now just smudges of ink. It isn't sad. It just feels distant. The kind of distant you don't really notice happening until you stop and look back. You might have felt that while cleaning out an old backpack or finding a school planner from years ago, seeing your whole routine written down with no emotion attached, just tasks and times. The kind of document that doesn't remember how you felt, only what you did. That wasn't where it ended, though. SpongeBob runs his finger over his name on the page. The paper feels warm, like it's been waiting under dim lights for years. It feels like the kind of warmth that lingers on a pillow after someone leaves. There's comfort in knowing these days happened, even if they're cloudy now. All the mornings, all the orders, all the laughs, all in a few fading lines. He thinks about how many times he clocked in with energy so bright it filled the whole room, and how many times he clocked out quietly after the day had worn him down. He remembers the smell of sizzling grill in the morning, the metallic click of the register, the soft slump of chairs being stacked at closing time. The schedule didn't capture any of that, yet somehow it still holds it. Routine can be like that. It shapes life slowly, like the tide shaping the shoreline. You don't always realize how much of yourself you've left in familiar places until you see it printed on paper. SpongeBob stares at his name one more time. It doesn't look like him exactly, but it feels like him. He gently pulls the schedule off the wall. Dust drifts from the corners as if stretching its arms. He doesn't crumple it. He doesn't keep it. He just looks at it in the evening light. The restaurant behind him quiet. The air still. The moment suspended. Then he carefully pins it back onto the wall. Not because it belongs there, but because it lived there. Days that happened, even if the details faded. That feeling only grew stronger later. As SpongeBob steps away from the wall, he understands something quietly. Not everything from your past needs to be remembered clearly. Some things just need to be acknowledged. And maybe that's enough. The shift schedule remains pinned behind him, resting in its place. Not forgotten, just finished. Evening settles over the Krusty Krab like a soft blanket. The sunlight filters through the windows, dipping low across the fryer baskets in shades of warm gold. It doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like the part of the day that finally exhales. Something about that moment stayed. SpongeBob stands behind the counter, in the same spot he's occupied countless times before. But tonight, he doesn't cook. He doesn't check timers or reach for ingredients. He just rests his hands on the counter and lets the warmth of the fading light rest against his skin. The quiet doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels earned. The sun hits the stainless steel surface, making it shimmer faintly. The baskets, usually rattling with sizzling oil, sit still. Everything looks strangely honored by the light, like the restaurant is glowing just for him. Maybe that's how places say thank you, by being still enough to let you finally breathe. You might have felt that after a long shift, walking to your car under streetlights with nothing left to do but exist. That feeling only grew stronger later. SpongeBob closes his eyes and breathes deeply. Not the kind of breath you take before starting work, but the one you take after finishing something important, even if you don't know what it was. It's the moment your shoulders finally drop, when the weight you didn't realize you were carrying slips away without fanfare. The fryer is silent. The grill is clean. The spatula rests like it's clocked out too. SpongeBob imagines the end of a long school day. The bell ringing, backpacks zipping, chatter fading as hallways empty. Those final minutes before everyone leaves, when the air feels heavy but somehow safe. That was the mood inside the Krusty Krab now. He looks around with slow eyes. Each chair seems to be resting. Each table seems to be gently remembering. The grease trap under the counter gives a soft metallic click as it cools. It's strange how even machines, seem calmer when the day winds down, as though everything understands the language of evening. Outside, the first streetlight flickers on, then another, and another. The town lights up one by one like everyone's clocking out together. SpongeBob watches from the window, feeling connected to every house with its curtains drawn, and every porch with a light left on. Night doesn't feel lonely when it arrives slowly. He walks back to the grill and stands where he always stands. The spot feels familiar, but different. He isn't here to work. He's simply here to be. Maybe that's the deepest kind of rest, to be somewhere you know well, without any task to finish. His reflection appears faintly in the metal, not crisp, not clear, just present. He smiles slightly, and the reflection seems to soften with him. Some days don't need achievements to matter. Some days simply need closure. The sun drifts lower until it disappears behind the rooftops. The gold fades into a muted blue, and the restaurant holds the last traces of day, like memories hanging in the air. SpongeBob turns off the lights one by one, not to end things, but to let them rest. He walks toward the exit and pauses at the door. The Krusty Krab stands behind him, silent, still, gentle, not empty, just finished, for today. Outside, the streetlights glow steadily. The night doesn't feel heavy. It feels deserved. SpongeBob steps into the evening air and breathes again. Tonight, he is off the clock. And that quiet release, soft, unspoken, feels like exactly what he needed. Night settles over Bikini Bottom, like it's tucking the town in for rest. The air cools gently, and the buildings seem to exhale with the darkness. SpongeBob steps outside the Krusty Krab and feels the evening wrap around him like a blanket still warm from the dryer. The streetlights glow in their usual places, flickering once before steadying themselves. But then he notices something different, something far away. A single light at the edge of town. It doesn't flicker. It just glows. Something about that moment stayed. It feels unlike the others. Streetlights blink. Porch lights hum. But this one is still, calm in a way lamps rarely are. It sits in the distance like a pause at the end of a sentence. Not closing anything. Just waiting. SpongeBob's eyes rest on it longer than he expects. It doesn't move or change, but it feels present, like it's aware of him. He steps forward slowly, letting the night air guide his pace. The wind brushes past as gently as a familiar voice, saying it's okay. He doesn't feel fear, only a quiet pull. You might have felt something like that while driving at night. Headlights stretching ahead like a path you don't have to understand to follow. That feeling only grew stronger later. The Krusty Krab settles behind him, its windows dark now, but peaceful. SpongeBob takes another step, then another. The sand shifts softly under his feet, each footprint fading almost as soon as it forms. The night smells slightly salty, and somewhere far away, a sea breeze moves through the dunes like a careful hand, smoothing a blanket. Nothing about this walk feels urgent. It simply feels right. The light doesn't grow brighter, but it doesn't fade either. It stays just where it is, as though it wants him to see it, but not rush. SpongeBob walks like someone heading toward a memory, one they haven't remembered yet. The sky above hangs deep and quiet, not threatening, just vast. He looks up and sees stars beginning to appear, like distant thoughts arriving slowly. As he reaches the edge of the street, he pauses. The town behind him looks different now. In the evening glow, every window and roof seems quietly aware of this moment. Bikini Bottom doesn't feel asleep anymore. It feels awake in a softer way. Not with noise, with attention. He takes another step. The light ahead feels like the kind you notice after a long day, when you turn off every lamp in the house, but one stays on in a room you forgot. Not because someone is there, but because the moment needs it. You might have seen that light before. A warm sliver under a doorway, a glow from a hallway, a sign that the day hasn't fully left yet. SpongeBob walks at a gentle pace, matching the rhythm of his breathing. He doesn't wonder what the light is. He just accepts that it's there. Some directions don't come with explanations. They come with calm certainty. The kind that doesn't speak, but makes sense anyway. The path isn't clear, and there's no map, but the air feels lighter as he walks. The quiet around him doesn't feel empty. It feels connected, like every part of the town is whispering together, not to send him forward, but to let him go gently. As he reaches the deeper part of evening, the streetlights behind him blur into soft halos. The distant light remains, waiting, present, and as SpongeBob continues toward it, he realizes something simple but important. He doesn't need to know where he's going. Tonight, the journey itself is enough. And now, for the first time all day, Bikini Bottom finally feels awake. SpongeBob walks until the road ends, and the sand begins. The town fades behind him, its lights soft and distant, like old memories settling into place. Ahead of him lies the open ocean, stretching wide and quiet beneath the silver night sky. And there it is, the light, still present, still steady, not glowing brightly, just beating gently like a quiet heartbeat. Something about that moment stayed. He doesn't try to understand it. He simply stands there, breathing in the salty air, while the wind moves through the dunes with the softness of a sigh. The light doesn't call to him with urgency. It just waits, as though it knows he's been walking a long time. You might have felt that before. The subtle pull towards something you don't have a name for yet, but feels like it's been waiting for you nonetheless. SpongeBob steps closer, his feet sinking slightly into the cool sand. He follows no path. There is none. He just walks in the direction his heart leans toward. The waves ahead move slowly, like they're practicing patience. When he reaches the shoreline, he sits, not to think, not to search for explanation, just to be present. The tide pulls forward, then eases back, over and over. It's a rhythm older than any question he's ever had. You can almost hear it, the repeating breath of the ocean, moving at the pace of memory. That wasn't where it ended, though. The light flickers briefly, but not uncertainly, more like acknowledgement, almost like a nod. SpongeBob watches it, and feels something he hasn't felt all day. Not an answer, but familiarity. Like this moment has happened before, and will happen again. Maybe answers don't always come in words. Maybe they arrive as feelings, ones that settle slowly, like dust falling through a ray of sunlight. Behind him, Bikini Bottom is quiet but not distant. It exists softly, as though the entire town is resting in a shared exhale. SpongeBob doesn't feel far from it. He feels connected to it in a way he hadn't earlier, as if walking away helped him see it clearer. Sometimes, stepping back is the only way to recognize what's been close all along. He runs his hand through the sand. It's cool and fine, like a surface worn smooth by time. He imagines every grain holding a memory, a laugh from a friend, a long workday, a sunrise he once watched without realizing it would matter later. He doesn't try to collect them. He just lets them be. The tide moves again, gentle as a whisper too quiet to interrupt. The light doesn't change. It remains steady, as if reminding him that not everything needs to shift, to mean something. SpongeBob lets his head rest back slightly, taking in the sky. The clouds drift like slow thoughts. The air tastes calm, and the ocean keeps breathing. That feeling only grew stronger later. Maybe life doesn't always give answers when we want them. Maybe it gives places, the kind where answers don't feel required. SpongeBob closes his eyes and listens to the tide. It doesn't speak. It doesn't solve anything, but it stays. And staying can be its own kind of kindness. When he opens his eyes again, the light is still there. The waves repeat, and the night holds stillness without demanding anything from him. No resolutions, no big endings, just presence, like someone quietly sitting beside you without needing to explain why. SpongeBob stays seated, breathing with the ocean, feeling the town behind him and the sea before him. He doesn't move. He doesn't speak. He just exists. And maybe that's enough for now. SpongeBob sits by the shore, feeling the sand mold to his shape, as though the earth itself is making space for him to rest. The tide moves with a slow rhythm that seems older than any thought he could name. Then the sound returns. Not the hum from earlier, but something deeper, like the ocean was opening a drawer it had kept closed for a long time. Something about that moment stayed. It doesn't come like music, more like a voice, humming from beneath the waves, carrying weight, but not pressure. SpongeBob watches the water and sees brief flickers in the surf, small flashes of moments he recognizes. A jellyfishing trip with Patrick, a laugh from Squidward he only heard once. The first time he put on his uniform at the Krusty Krab, not full scenes, just fragments, tiny glimmers that vanish before they fully form. They don't feel heavy. They feel like reminders, like someone tapping him on the shoulder, gently saying, "This happened and you felt it." As the tide continues to move, the memories drift in and out. His heart doesn't speed up. His mind doesn't race. Everything feels softer now, the way your brain feels when you're almost asleep, drifting between thoughts you don't try to hold. The water seems to be helping him carry things he didn't know he was still holding. You might have known that feeling too, the one that appears when the day finally ends and your mind loosens its grip. Not forgetting, just releasing. The kind of release that doesn't erase anything. It just asks you to set it down for a while. That wasn't where it ended, though. The tide pulls forward and eases back, and SpongeBob sees more flashes. Sandy repairing something in her dome. Squidward staring out his window after another long shift. Patrick smiling for no reason at all. Times they were together. Times they drifted apart. Not dramatic. Just life. He watches the fragments without chasing them, like watching clouds pass overhead, changing shape before they have time to explain themselves. Maybe this is what memory really is. A quiet archive of moments that don't ask to be seen, but don't want to be forgotten either. A collection that sits inside us, surfacing only when we're still enough to notice. SpongeBob lets them pass, one by one, feeling lighter with each glimpse. He doesn't try to understand. He just lets them exist. The waves roll, and the ocean seems to speak without sound, a message not meant to answer anything, only to remind him that life happened, and he felt it. Sometimes joy, sometimes confusion, sometimes routine, but always living. Maybe memories don't belong behind us. Maybe they belong beside us, carried gently as we move from one day into the next. SpongeBob digs his fingers lightly into the sand, feeling something loosen inside him. The water approaches again, then withdraws, and with it, some invisible weight seems to follow. It's not gone, just shared, carried by something larger. The ocean never promises to fix anything. It only promises to carry. That feeling only grew stronger later. He breathes in the briny air, letting the night settle into his lungs. The sky above deepens into blue, while distant stars blink awake like small memories of their own. The sound fades, but not entirely. It lingers like the last note of a lullaby, a reminder that release doesn't always require words. SpongeBob rests his palms against the ground. The water moves slow, like it's easing pressure he didn't know he kept. Not all at once, just enough. Enough to breathe, enough to feel unburdened, enough to rest. The ocean has been holding things, and now, slowly, it returns them, lighter than before. Not to be solved, only to be felt. And in that quiet exchange, SpongeBob finally understands that letting go doesn't mean losing anything. It simply means you don't have to carry it alone. SpongeBob sits quietly as the tide fades into a softer rhythm. The echoes of memory drift through the air, like they're finding their places. Then something shifts. Not loudly, not suddenly. Just a slow realization that settles in, like a thought you've had for years, but never said out loud. Something about that moment stayed. He looks at the horizon and understands. This was the episode that never aired, not because it was lost, but because it was meant to be felt, not watched. It was never meant for the TV screen. It was meant for the space between everyday moments. The walk back from school, when your backpack felt heavier than usual. The late-night reruns under a blanket, when your heart needed a place to rest. The weekend mornings when nothing hurt, and cartoons filled the silence with soft company. SpongeBob realizes the episode was always here, scattered across years, waiting to be noticed. It didn't need a title card. It didn't need credits. It was stitched into real life, in glances, in memories, in sighs, in pauses. The kind of episode that slips into the background and stays there like a favorite song you never search for, but always recognize. He watches the waves glimmer like tiny fragments of scenes. He sees Patrick smiling at him from another summer. He sees Squidward muttering about chaos but staying close anyway. He sees laughter woven into places that no longer exist exactly as they were, but still live somewhere inside him. Maybe episodes don't disappear. Maybe they just change formats, from stories on screen to feelings in the heart. That wasn't where it ended, though. The ocean breathes gently, and SpongeBob slowly understands that some stories never needed an audience. They only needed someone willing to feel them. The episode we never saw didn't need to air. It needed to linger. It needed to settle into quiet corners of life where nobody thinks to look. The corners of bedrooms lit only by a laptop screen. The hallway outside a classroom when you pretend you're not nervous. The living room at midnight when you leave the TV on just to hear another voice. He realizes that maybe nobody forgot this episode after all. Maybe every person who ever felt alone carried a piece of it without knowing. Maybe that's why it never showed up on any schedule. Because it wasn't meant to be scheduled. It was meant to appear exactly when it was needed, like a whisper that reaches you the moment your thoughts start to ache. SpongeBob watches the tide move in and out and thinks, maybe comfort doesn't always arrive with explanations. Maybe it just arrives. Quietly, in the form of a memory, a familiar sound, a gentle breeze against the window, a voice you imagined, even if it wasn't really there. And somehow it helps, even if only for a moment. You might have felt forgotten once, maybe more than once, but something remembered you. Maybe a song, a smell, a cartoon rerun that came on at just the right time. That's how this episode lives, not in sight, in timing, in presence. The ocean glows faintly, as if agreeing. SpongeBob places his hand on the sand and lets the thought settle completely. The episode never needed to be seen. It only needed to be felt. It didn't play once. It played across years, in hearts that needed company, especially on nights when silence felt too wide to face alone. SpongeBob smiles softly. No big emotion, just understanding. A quiet acceptance that this story was never missing. It was simply waiting. And now, finally, someone saw it exactly the way it was meant to be seen. Not on screen, but in memory. The horizon begins to change. Not suddenly, not loudly, but in a way that feels like the world loosening its shoulders. The silver sky from earlier slowly softens into a faint blue, the kind you might miss if you weren't looking for it. It isn't daytime yet, but it hints that morning might not be so far away. Something about that moment stayed. SpongeBob rises from the sand and brushes off his hands. He doesn't feel fixed or transformed, just lighter, like his thoughts found room to breathe. The tide keeps its rhythm behind him, soft and steady. He doesn't need the light to hurry. The slow change feels better. You might have felt that while sitting awake at night, waiting for sleep to come, when suddenly your mind eases, not with answers, but with quiet. He takes a step forward, and the breeze follows gently, as if walking with him. The waves don't speak. They just continue their pattern, in and out, in and out. Sometimes hope is like that, not a burst, but a steady motion that doesn't demand anything. The sky continues to shift, more blue now, though still blended with night. It's the kind of change that whispers instead of announces. That feeling only grew stronger later. SpongeBob walks back toward town, his footsteps slow yet certain. Nothing looks different, but everything feels a little softer. Morning hasn't arrived, but the idea of it has. And sometimes, that's enough. He looks at the clouds overhead and sees that they're changing shape, drifting toward a color that feels closer today. Maybe mornings don't always need dramatic sunrises. Maybe sometimes they begin as a change in the air, a warmth on your sleeve, or the faintest hint of blue at the edge of night. As he reaches the path leading into town, the silence follows him, but not heavily. It walks beside him now like a friend. The same quiet that earlier felt mysterious now feels comfortable, familiar, like it's known him longer than he realized. He glances toward Squidward's house, still silent, still resting. But now, it doesn't look alone. It looks peaceful. He walks past Patrick's rock, The sand is still smooth, but somehow it doesn't feel empty. It feels ready. Routine places sometimes wait for you even when you're away. You might have seen that in an old neighborhood, how the sidewalks seem to remember your steps, even if they don't show them. As SpongeBob moves forward, he realizes nothing around him has changed, but something inside him has. Not a big shift, just enough to feel like breathing is easier, just enough to believe morning is coming, even if he can't see the sun yet. The town lights flicker quietly as he passes under them. The air tastes less like night and more like a beginning. Not the kind of beginning that asks for energy, just the kind that gives permission to keep going. Bikini Bottom hasn't become a different place, but it feels new, like a room you've walked into thousands of times and suddenly notice from a different angle. He walks past the Krusty Krab. Its windows reflect the soft blue of the sky. He smiles, not because everything makes sense, but because things don't feel quite as heavy now. Maybe that's enough. Maybe feeling just a little lighter than before is its own kind of sunrise. SpongeBob keeps moving, his footsteps gentle against the sand. Morning is still ahead, but it doesn't need to hurry. The sky brightens one shade at a time. And as he walks, Bikini Bottom remains quiet, but no longer silent. It feels alive in a softer way, as though it's waking up slowly with him. Sometimes hope doesn't arrive like light. Sometimes it arrives like breath. And tonight, as the sky begins to shift, SpongeBob breathes just a little easier. Ding dong. The first hint of daylight touches the rooftops like a soft brushstroke. Not bright, not rushed, just a gentle signal that night is slowly stepping back. Bikini Bottom feels alive again, but in a quiet way, like someone opening their eyes without moving yet. The air is cooler, the streets are still, but something feels awake. Something about that moment stayed. SpongeBob walks through town without thinking about where to step. His mind doesn't wander toward worries or plans. It drifts, the way thoughts drift when sleep is near. Not sharp, not urgent, just passing through like clouds moving slowly across a pale sky. And somehow, that feels peaceful. Sometimes, not having thoughts can be its own kind of comfort. As he walks past the Krusty Krab one more time, the windows catch a bit of early light. It reminds him of all the mornings he spent there, apron tied tight, ready to work before the town was fully awake. The memory doesn't ask anything from him. It simply smiles and waits at a distance. That wasn't where it ended, though. The houses around him remain still, yet they don't feel empty. They feel like they're holding quiet conversations with the coming day. The breeze moves softly across the street, like someone straightening bed sheets before leaving the room. SpongeBob notices small things. A mailbox door tapping lightly, a flicker from a porch light finally shutting off, the sandy footprints that trail behind him before disappearing. They don't need explanations. They're just proof that he was here. As the sky brightens one shade at a time, SpongeBob realizes something simple. This episode never needed credits, or titles, or an ending. It was never really meant to be watched. It was meant to be felt, in the quiet places inside us that only open at night. Places that don't need answers, only comfort. Maybe that's where it lives now. Not on a screen, but in the soft space between thoughts. The space right before sleep, where memory mixes with imagination, and time slows just enough to let your heart rest. You might have visited that space before, the moment your eyes get heavy and you feel everything fading into softness. The moment where nothing hurts, even if just for a minute. SpongeBob reaches his street. The daylight still hides behind the horizon, but it feels close now. Morning doesn't need to rush. It knows how to arrive slowly. He walks toward his pineapple house with quiet steps. Not tired, not eager, just present. That feeling only grew stronger later. He stops at his door and looks around at the town one last time. Bikini Bottom hasn't changed, but it feels different. Or maybe he does. Sometimes that's all it takes. A night that reminds you to breathe. A quiet episode that doesn't need a plot to matter. He opens the door gently, letting the dim light from inside blend with the pale morning outside. No fanfare, no big moment, just a peaceful transition, the kind that happens when you're finally ready to rest. Maybe this episode will never play on TV. Maybe nobody will list it as their favorite. But it exists, in every heart that needed it, in every quiet night that felt a little too long, in every gentle memory that helped someone fall asleep. Some episodes aren't meant to be watched. They're meant to be carried, and this one now belongs to anyone who needs it, whenever they need it, wherever they are. Maybe we'll never find every lost episode, but maybe we don't need to. Some memories weren't meant to be proven, only remembered. If tonight felt calm, even just a little, then that's enough. Sleep well. Dream softly. Good night.